Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. My guest today on Better Than I Found It is Mississippi Gulf Coast head coach Brad Thornton. Brad, who's also an alumnus of Mississippi Gulf Coast, recently led his team to its second straight NJCAA Division II National Championship. Brad is a fairly young head coach at 31, but his wisdom is well beyond that. I think you'll enjoy hearing about his journey. Thanks again for joining me on Better Than I Found It. Okay, Better Than I Found It faithful. My guest today is Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College head coach Brad Thornton. Brad, appreciate you taking an hour to talk basically everything college golf.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, Coach. Loyal listener for years, and very excited to be on, and honored that you're asking me to come on and talk about college golf at the junior college level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess congratulations are in order. Just a little over a week ago, your team captured its second consecutive NJCAA National or Division II National Championship. Congrats, Coach. You must still be like over the moon with pride and joy for your team.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a tough week, a long season, trying to defend a national championship, and really happy we were able to get it done, and just kind of relaxing a little bit now that we're into summer, a little bit of recruiting going on, but beyond that, just spending some more time with family and my kids and wife, and going to the pool to have some crawfish later. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. My wife is a crawfish eater. I'm not, never learned to do it. So don't try to talk me into that today. If she can't talk me into it, you're certainly not going to. Winning a national championship, it's like an amazing feeling. And to me, whenever it happened, it always felt like, gosh, I don't care really what happens this summer. This is pretty good. But the truth is you kind of have to get back up and get prepared for the next year. And at the junior college level, it seems like you're always reloading. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But, winning a national championship is truly monumental. It's tough. I don't care what level. I don't care what division. But doing it twice in a row, that's like really, really hard. I look back at Mike Holder's career at Oklahoma State. He basically had the best team in the country, either first or second best team in the country for 20 years. And he only won 5 national championships during that 20-year period. He looks back on it and thinks we could have won so many more. It's not easy. And he never repeated as a national champion, as a head coach. And I just think it's a really hard thing to do. So this past season, how did you handle those newfound expectations? And just how did you handle that with your team?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, with junior college, you're getting a very quick turnover, and just when you feel like you're comfortable with your guys, it's time for them to move on. And we had a really good group this year returning, and when it comes to repeating for a national championship, you have to have something go your way that may be unexpected, whether it's a new freshman coming in that you've never seen under the gun, or whether it's maybe a sophomore returning that maybe meets higher expectations than you had. And we had a little bit of all of that over the past couple of years. But, this sophomore class was unbelievable from the time they set foot on campus. The goal was to be back where we finished in 2024. And those guys really took it upon themselves. The most success that we've ever had is obviously with the team driven, the players driven, for the team, and they do an outstanding job on their own. And then also, just taking back that experience of what it took to get through that 2024 season. A lot of people don't know, but in 2023, we won 11 out of 13 events. And the only one we didn't win was the Golf Coaches Association puts on an event up in Michigan. We had playing against Division II, Division III NCAA programs. We lost that, which was the first event of the year, and then we lost the last event, which was the national championship. So a lot of heartache went into that. That class kind of came in the following year, and it was either get on the train or get off the tracks kind of mentality. And then this year we had 2 or 3 guys that played, instrumental roles on that team their freshman year, and they kind of came in with that same mentality. And, sometimes they have to be reminded of it. I tell people all the time, our careers, and especially mine at the junior college level, is based off of somewhere between 17 and 20-year-olds and their decision making. And it may not always be perfect, but these guys had a lot of maturity, the way they handled their business on and off the golf course. One of the biggest things that we have at the junior college level that maybe not a lot of people are have that luxury is we have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. And when my guys are in the weight room, mandated twice a week, but when they're in there on Fridays on their own time, that kind of tells you all you need to know about doing the little things right when they're at the range on the weekends. Those type of decision making, from younger men, getting ready to go out into the real world, that tells you they're going to be prepared, whether it's going to play golf at the next level, whether it's relationships, whether it's their careers, whatever it is. So I was very lucky to have a very mature group this year.
Well, that's great. The one thing junior college coaches do a better job of than Division One coaches, in my opinion, is developing a family team environment, and you have to do it in a shorter amount of time. You have you've got 2 less years to do that. And my good friend Vince Clark at McLennan Junior College right here in Waco, I think does the best job of any coach I've ever seen of that, of developing just a thread through the years of guys that want, and you've got that with you because you played there and you understand how important that is. How are you able to do that? You've got less time. How do you develop a team environment, a family environment in just 2 years?
I think the number one priority is living that by example. I love having my wife on trips with me to golf tournaments. I love having my kids. My little girl was off for spring break, and we had an event, one of our conference events up in Central Mississippi, and I loaded her up, and she rode around in the cart with me and could give two rips about golf right now, but she just loves spending time with me. And having my kids there at that first national championship was important. My parents actually traveled up for the national tournament. So living it by example and letting those guys know, and these guys will tell you if you ever run across them at the next level, I end a lot of conversations with "I love you guys," whether it's a positive conversation or a negative conversation about our day or about our experience or tournament play or whatever. I want these guys to know that I do love them. I want them to know that they've got my full support. And, like I said, through the good and through the bad, we're going to make sure that these guys know that they're cared about. And that starts from the recruiting process. I mean, I'm going to tell their parents that they're going to be taken care of. They're going to be safe. They're going to be looked after. All of those things that moms and dads really want to know. I tell people all the time, if you're on a recruiting visit to Mississippi Gulf Coast, it's not to figure out if you can play golf. It's to figure out if you're the right fit for us and we're the right fit for you. And that, I think it goes both ways. And I tell people all the time, if I'm not the right fit for you, if you think your talents can be utilized better somewhere else, I'll help you out with that. I don't have any ego when it comes to thinking my way is the only way. But if it is going to be at our program, it's going to be through, a respectful family environment.
I love that. I really do. And I think that's why I think junior college coaches do a better job of it, because for one, your kids are always looking to leave. I mean, they will leave after 2 years for sure. But you want to make their time that they are there so valuable. They're thankful that they went there. We're going to talk about your assistant coach later, about his time there and how he's back with the program. But I want to talk about the memories you've had the last 2 years, winning 2 national championships in a row. But before we do that, I always kind of like to go back. And you being a loyal listener know that when I ask coaches, hey, how did you get in the game? And then how did that get you to the coaching profession? But you grew up in a small town with a 9-hole golf course. Are there disadvantages and advantages both? And who was your biggest influence in your game as a kid?
Yeah. So, going back, my dad was a coach, retired from the Mississippi Department of Education after I think it was 25, 28 years or so. So he was coaching, really into baseball and softball also. Summers were really important to us. And, we would wake up and we would go play with 2 or 3 of his coaching friends. And the golf course was right across the street from our high school. 5 minutes from the house. It was a 9-hole goat ranch. There's no doubt about that. And never really recovered after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. But, growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was the place to be. You could go out and play 72 holes in a day if you wanted to. It did not have a driving range. It was all about getting out there and just getting after it. And I think that really exemplifies what the junior college mentality is as well. But, we would be out there, tee off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd be back at home in the pool at my parents' house by 11:30. before the lunch group teed off. And, as I continued to get a little bit older and could go out there by myself, it was the same thing. Friends, our golf team always had 12, 15 guys on the team, had some success throughout the state of Mississippi. And it was just a fun group to be around and getting to play golf every single day. And it also, like I said, may not have been in the best of shape. So what it was is you had a bunch of guys that were very appreciative when they got to go somewhere else and play. Very respectful of facilities and thankful when you got to get on some better greens, when you got to get into some fairways that maybe didn't have bahia grass growing out of them. So, but I wouldn't trade that for anything. A couple of my good friends, a couple of them are in the PGA of America and different roles in the golf industry. And we talk about it all the time. Like, you ever dream about, if that course was still open, what would happen, or if it was ever in really good shape? And so we still think about that place, and it holds a special place to me. But yeah, it started. I guess from what I remember, 2 years old, I would go out and putt, whenever my dad got on the green. And then by the time I was 3 or 4 years old, I was playing, 100 yard marker, 150 yard marker in the end. And you just kind of I worked my way all the way back to the women's tee. And then, before you know it, it was time to play high school golf. And I started that in 7th grade. And, one of my coaches was also a football coach, and his son played, and he did an outstanding job. You get a lot of van drivers or bus drivers in high school golf, but he was an excellent golf coach, Darwin Nelson, and did a remarkable job in growing the game in such a small town with not a lot of facilities, and could not be more thankful for those opportunities and that upbringing on that golf course.
One of my former players, Braden Bailey, played here. Amazing career at Baylor, but he grew up in a 9-hole golf course in Port Neches, Texas, and some 2 other tour players came out of that golf course. He's no longer playing professional golf, but it's amazing what can be spawned out of just a small little, very non fancy, if you will, just a small place like that where the focus is on playing the game. And with no range, you guys did not become obsessed with your golf swing. You became obsessed with playing the game. That's a difference for a lot of kids who grow up on a range.
Absolutely. And, figuring out a way to get the golf ball in the hole. I tell people all the time, the range is a great place to work on technique and mechanics, but I've never seen anybody, techniques and mechanics don't get the golf ball in the hole when things aren't going great.
I agree with you. Okay, so as a player, you didn't hit it very long. You were kind of a shorter player off the tee, but you became a good player anyway. How did you do that? And part of that experience that you had yourself, has that helped you as a coach, help guys that don't hit it that far?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I try to recruit guys that hit it as far as possible because it makes the game so much easier these days.
It does. It does.
But, just staying within yourself. I'm going to be honest. I don't really like looking at my golf swing on camera or anything like that. But it's just about being a competitor and being an athlete. And by no means was I a superior athlete at anything. I was just I was the guy that could go play any sport and just enjoyed it. And I love to compete. My wife still doesn't. I really don't play a lot of board games with my wife because she's better than me, and I'm not very good at handling losing. I'm probably a worse loser than I am a good winner. Hate losing more than I like to win, and that's kind of what drove me in every sport. My dad got out of coaching baseball around 2003, and I was kind of split between playing baseball and playing golf. And I was like, well, we could keep trying this baseball thing, but I'm not going to play for my dad when I grow up. And I'm kind of slow and not that great of an athlete. So why don't we just pick up golf and just kind of take it on full go. And from there on, it was just an addiction. There's still not many days where, a lot of coaches, they might have different hobbies. Mine's still playing golf. I still like to play as much as I can competitively. Like I said, joining the PGA of America was a great thing. I know that used to be the norm with golf coaches, and now it's kind of not. But that industry still allows us the opportunity to play competitively and a little bit better schedule. It's kind of hard to coach 5 days during the week and play a little bit, practice a little bit, and tell your wife, all right, well, now I'm going to go play in, the state am this weekend, or I'm going to go play in whatever event that's going on Saturday, Sundays. So, the weekends are kind of evolve around being for the family, but man, during the week, golf is still the greatest hobby that I have and the most fun that I have, whether it's coaching it, playing it, hanging out at the range, whatever it is.
Well, you obviously learned to play it well enough, and but you said you love the game still. I think that's a really important quality. If a guy doesn't love the game, he's not going to play it for a living. That's for sure. But looking back, would you now, as a coach, would you recruit your 17-year-old self? And if so, why?
There's a few qualities of yes and no to that. Yes, for being a competitor. Yes, for being having that golf addiction. What I figured out in the recruiting process is look at what these kids are doing when they turn 16, 17 years old and they start to get a driver's license. It's really easy to be addicted and love to play golf when, your parents are taking you to the golf course and you really don't have a lot of options for things to do. So from that standpoint, yes, just based off of being a competitor and loving to play this game, you got to play so much more golf than you think at the collegiate level. And you've got to get through, you've got to play golf when you're not playing great golf. And being mentally tough enough to do that. And I think that's some of the characteristics that got me where I am today. So I definitely look for those in young golfers and recruits. The other part is I had a really bad temper, like a lot of golfers. I was really short tempered and very emotional, and I'm still very emotional. Even though, later on into my coaching career and playing career and things like that, I kind of figured that, nobody really cares. I use that story a lot with my guys. Nobody listens in the van ride home and feels sorry for you when you have 4 3 putts or you hit 3 balls out of bounds. I tell my guys, I said, to be honest, they're just listening so they can respond or one up you with whatever their story is. Nobody really cares that you shot 82 today, and they're not going to have any sympathy for you. So kind of taking the emotional aspect out of the game a little bit. Those would be things that I would work on with 17-year-old me. But again, I don't ever get the luxury of seeing a 22, 23, 24-year-old, athlete that kind of has that aha moment. So we just have to withstand through the recruiting process that they're going to make mistakes. I tell my kids all the time, you can make any mistake you want. There's going to be repercussions for it, but I'm going to start having a problem if those mistakes begin to occur numerous times. You can miss a class, you can make a mistake on the golf course, you can do all these things that 17, 18, 19-year-old kids are going to do. But ultimately, how you respond from it, how you learn from it is kind of what sets the standard on where we're going to go from there, and whether you're cut out to be, a collegiate golfer or just really just a good person. You need to understand that the world doesn't revolve around you anymore. And, you're to be a respectful representative of our school and all of these things. And through that recruiting process, you really get to know these guys. I tell them all the time, look, you've got my cell phone number. Call me. If you have questions, if you have concerns, call me. And I tell the parents the same thing through that recruiting process. Now, how that works out from there, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, just like with any sport and recruiting. But I really kind of stand firm on that you've got to have a competitive backbone to play this game, especially at the junior college level, because it's not always pretty. It's a grind, and you don't get all the luxuries necessarily. We're taken care of, and we have awesome facility, opportunity to play, schedules, all those things. But you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit, and if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe you aren't the right fit.
Yeah, good. How old are you, by the way?
31.
So when I was 31, I was coaching at Eben High School, and there's no way I could answer these questions back then the way you're answering right now. So you're a really mature 31-year-old coach. I didn't have that in me. I promise you I didn't. So I'm impressed so far, but it's not over. The interview's not over. So you took over literally for a legend, a Hall of Fame coach, Tommy Snell, one of my favorite coaches. He was just maybe one of the funniest guys, great sense of humor, really good competitor. But you took over for him. Did you feel extra pressure taking over a program that he coached to a national championship back in 2018? There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said, winning a national championship's hard, but he had some outstanding teams and some outstanding players prior to that. Long before I came along, long before after I came on as an assistant coach. And, when you talk about people that have impacted your life, next to my dad, he would be the second father figure that I've had. I think I'm only down to calling him once a week now for questions, maybe every other week, whereas it used to be 3 to 4 times a week. And I know, his bedtime's about 7:30 at night, so don't call him past then. And when he's done talking, he's going to say bye and hang up, and you just have to call back and try again later if you forgot something. But man, he has been outstanding. Leader and educator. I mean, people don't realize this. He was teaching 5 English classes. He wasn't teaching walking classes at the junior college or anything like that. And the impact he had across that entire campus and with me and everyone else that's come through the golf program is second to none.
Yeah, Tommy's a legend, a true legend, and I still love seeing him at the NCAA championship. He's a rules official, a starter sometimes, but Tommy's still well connected with the game and just a great coach. But I talked to him and I asked him about you before this interview, and here's some quotes from him. He said, "Not many junior golfers wake up wanting to go to a junior college. I think Brad did. He probably always wanted to play for me. Now, is that true or not? Some truth in there?"
That's completely true. Look, everybody has the lofty goals and wants to go play Division I at a Power Four program, and I kind of knew I had a self-awareness about me to know that I wasn't, ready for that or might not ever be ready for that. But I knew how Mississippi Gulf Coast operated. I was also a homebody, something I've tried to grow from and express to these kids that it's not, all about being comfortable. You got to be uncomfortable, to grow. And I was lucky to go through some of those experiences. But yeah, no doubt. I wanted to play for Coach Snell. I probably pestered him more than anybody else because I grew up, like I said, 45 minutes down the road. And it ended up being a really tough gig because I think my freshman year, there were only 2 roster spots available. So he's recruiting the entire state of Mississippi. And I pestered him enough, and I maybe happened to play well on my visit over there. Maybe the best round I'd played in a couple of weeks. So I was able to nickel and dime my way down Highway 26 to Perkinston, and he put up with me enough. And I guess it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it definitely worked out. He said Brad just loves the game of golf like nobody I've ever seen. He would play golf every day, even if he had to do that by himself. Is that true? You love the game that much?
Yeah, very just appreciative of the game. Like I said, when you have all the time in the world to play golf growing up as a junior, and then it just never really wore off. Some of my other hobbies did, especially when I started to have kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old now, and I used to be into a lot of hunting and especially duck hunting and stuff like that. And waking up at 2 a.m. and go duck hunting, come back, take a nap, and go back that afternoon, hang out with my friends. And then the kids started not to sleep, or they would, when they slept in, I slept in. But golf was always kind of the constant through any of those hobbies. And yeah, there's nothing I like more than playing a good golf course, whether it's by myself, whether it's with a group of friends. I can play golf with anybody. My dad had a really good rule. He said, "You can play bad golf, just play fast golf." So that's really my only negative, is I don't really like to play 5-6 hour rounds. But I've got tons of different groups that I can play with down here on the Gulf Coast, and a plethora of options of courses, and it's just an outstanding relationship that we have down here with those facilities. And like I said, growing up on a 9-hole golf course that wasn't in the best of condition, every golf course I go to, I feel like I'm appreciative to be out there.
One of the things that I talk to about guys is you're not going to play professionally if you don't love the game. So the guys that come in and sit in my office and I talk to them, but one of the things I want to do is make sure you love the game as much after 4 years or more than you did when you got to Baylor, or when you came underneath my leadership. So I think love for anything is important in being successful or being good at something. So and I'm sure your players take that from your example. But Coach Snell also said that Brad was the most confident golfer I ever coached. I wish I could bottle it. So he just felt like you had a lot of self-confidence and self-belief. Is that true? And how do you spill that over into your players?
Yeah, I definitely think it's true. I feel like I have false confidence at times, and other times where maybe it does have some substance behind it. But ultimately, if you don't believe in yourself, I don't think anybody else is going to believe in you. And if I don't believe in myself as a player or even as a coach now, if I don't believe in this team, then the team's probably not going to get behind that, that vision or what our goals are. It's consistent. You'll figure out if you ever have to sit in a team meeting with me, I'm very repetitive, but it's repetitive about certain things that I think are non-negotiable, things that we have to buy into. And I was just repetitive enough to tell myself I could do this. And I've been like every other golfer. Growing up, I quit golf 100 times and picked it back up 101. But that was a mental part of my game that I had to have, because physically it just wasn't overly impressive at any point.
Yeah, if you don't love the game, though, and the game will beat you down, there's no doubt about it. But if you love it, you'll always come back that 101st time for sure. Coach Snell, to me, was a great coach. How did he impact your coaching style? I know you wanted to be your own coach. You didn't want to be just like Tommy Snell. But what do you think was been his biggest impact on the way you coach players and run a team?
The first thing that I picked up on Coach Snell is, don't put anything in place for your team or any rules that you're not willing to police. And he had some different ones than maybe I agree with, some old school, wearing your hat inside might get you penalized for in qualifying. You had to carry an umbrella with you at all times. We drank water on trips, and all these things are still things you put forth to your players because it makes them better, makes them more responsible. But even the things that you may not agree with, don't put those in place unless you're ready to police them consistently across your entire team. And then the second part, and probably the most impactful thing in my coaching mentality, is everything's got to have competition. You've got to have winners and losers in this game. It doesn't matter how good you hit it on the range, because that's nowhere near what it's going to feel like on the 18th hole of a national championship. And he did it through qualifying a ton. I mean, we qualified for every event. We were probably qualifying more than any team in the country, and that was great. And I've shifted that a little bit. A lot of our qualifying is closer to the 36 and 54 hole events, play 2-3 days in a row and then maybe have a day off to refocus on some things. But even on those off days, I say off days, even on those practice days, there's some type of competition level, a winner and a loser, and some type of repercussions for it, whether it's, push-ups or whatever it is, physical activity. You've got to be a competitor. And, it was with him, it was, we're going to qualify for all 5 spots. And if you're in the top 5, you get to go and show me what you're made of. And I tried that one time my first year. And the number 1 player in the country didn't make the trip. And I don't know if you're too familiar with the junior college rosters, but there's a big difference between your number 1 player and your number 6 player. And so I axed that one pretty quick. I didn't go back. I didn't go back to that strategy after that. I was very disappointed to get in the van for that tournament. But you live and you learn. But I do think at the junior college level and any level of golf, if you're not willing to compete for your spot or compete every single day, then it's going to be a rough go for you.
Love it. That's really, really good. Tommy Snell, obviously, as a coach, you have a great amount of respect for, and he taught you a lot. But do you have any other all-time favorite coaches in other sports? And if so, what would those qualities be? Who are those people?
Yeah, a lot of these elite coaches, you talk about the discipline and you see the social media rants of them losing their mind and things, but the bottom line is they're consistent, and that's what makes them successful. Down here in the South and with college football, obviously, Nick Saban's the first one that comes to mind. And I was an LSU fan, still am an LSU fan growing up. And, that was great in 2003. But then you spent the next 15 years wondering how to beat this guy and never really could. But, when you get to the level of coaching at the collegiate level, then all of a sudden you have this undeniable respect for someone like that, and the consistency and the expectations were there in every aspect. And, sometimes it comes off a little harsher to your players, and sometimes, you don't go viral on social media for sitting them down and telling them how much you care, but that was happening. That you have these relationships. A lot of the coaches that I talk to at different levels of collegiate golf, great conversations with, pick their brains about everything. Look, I don't pretend to know everything about the golf swing. I don't pretend to know everything about recruiting or anything like that. I feel like we've got a pretty good plan in place to succeed at Mississippi Gulf Coast, but I'm always looking to learn from these different coaches. And, and this is kind of down a rabbit hole a little bit, but I was having a conversation with another golf coach the other day, and it was about a third party coach at the Division I level. And he said, I just don't think that he's going to receive any wedding invitations or baby announcements, or that coach is going to get a lot of calls to check up on him after the players leave this program. And I said, well, if that's what it takes to be at that level, then I'm perfectly fine here. I'll retire from Mississippi Gulf Coast. But what we're going to do is care about these kids and be really consistent with them, because this is a huge part of their life. It's the first time away from home. It's the first time that they're getting a dose of the real world. And you got to love them through their mistakes, and you got to coach them hard even when they're successful. And that was kind of something that Coach Saban always portrayed. And the guys, I've still got a couple former players that I think it still pops up on their phone as Coach Saban whenever I call. But they, like I said, I did have a temper when I was younger. It didn't go completely away, but if it ever gets to that point, we're going out to the track at 5:30 in the morning or whatever it is that you have to do to get their attention. As long as it's consistent, you're going to be successful.
I love that. And Nick Saban's one of my favorites. I got to know him a little bit when I was in Alabama that year, and he's very close to Jay Sewell, the head men's golf coach that I worked for. Nick Saban's one of the greatest coaches ever, and I think it's hard to argue against that for sure.
Now, when you were at Alabama, was Robbie Shelton there at that point? I think.
Oh yeah, he was a freshman. Yeah, Robbie is. Yeah, he and I still talk a lot through text messaging.
So I grew up 2 or 3 years older than Robbie, and we both lived right there outside of West Mobile. And I played junior tournaments until he got to be about 8 or 9 and realized that he was going to be better than everybody and go play on a national level.
Were you from Wilmer, Alabama?
I am sitting at my house right now in Agricola, Mississippi, about 10 minutes from Wilmer, Alabama. Mobile was the closest place to play junior golf for us growing up, along with a few, different events down on the Mississippi coast. But that young man was the most humble, and he would just beat your brains in and not say a word about it. And that just fired me up. And he was also 3 years younger than everybody in our age group at that time. So a short stint being around him, my dad still follows him on the, PGA Tour and the leaderboards and everything. So I knew that connection previously, but man, what an outstanding individual that had to be able to coach the collegiate level.
Gosh, I got to tell you, that was a great year in every respect for me to recharge my batteries, get ready for another opportunity. But Robbie Shelton he's a legend down there, and he loved to hunt and fish, and he would go hunting. He wouldn't touch his golf clubs at Christmas break. He wouldn't even touch them. And he came back first day in January, and he looked a little rusty. And I said, "So you've been hunting?" He said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Well, how many deer did you shoot?" He said, "I didn't hit a one." And I said, "Well, Robbie, I don't know what you gained. You didn't hit a golf shot and you didn't hit a deer. That was a bad Christmas break." But he was the first team All-American that year. So it all worked out, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Listen, recruiting to JUCO, it's a little different. We talked briefly about it earlier, but what specifically, you talked about your 17-year-old self. Would you recruit him? You said yes. You talked about some of the qualities that you look for, but what's a disqualifier? Something you're going to go, whoa, this isn't going to happen anymore. What would that be?
There's the stereotypical answer of, how they treat their parents, how they act on the golf course, and all of those things. But it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. If you look at their tournament schedule and it was loaded when they were 12, 13, 14 years old, and they were beating everybody and things like that, and then they have this plateau effect once they get a driver's license, and their social media goes from golf and tournament updates to, hanging out. There's nothing wrong with having a social life. There's not. Everybody has that opportunity to do whatever they want to, as they enter high school and into adulthood, but also playing golf at the collegiate level is not for everybody either. I can kind of tell early on if you're going to be a fit, and Perkinson, Mississippi is a different animal. I mean, we're surrounded by a couple larger towns down here on the coast, and the golf is great and things like that. But socially, if you're not ready to essentially be in the middle of nowhere for 2 years, and our campus has 12 different athletic sports. So if you're not ready to be around that environment and competition, and that's not for you, if the social life is for you, then it's probably not going to be a good fit. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are kids that we recruit and it doesn't work out. There's kids that they ask for different circumstances and we kind of steer them in a different direction. Say, hey, look, maybe this is the coach you need to go talk to. And then there's the kids that you feel the worst about, which is you recruit them, you think it's going to work out great, and then you mutually figure out about 7 months in that it's just not the right fit, and you have to sit down and have that conversation with them. And what I want those kids to know, and even the kids that maybe we don't recruit all the way throughout the process, is, look, we still care about you, but if I didn't care about you, I would let you hang around and be miserable. And those red flags that you see on the golf course, that's 4, 5, 6 hours of your day. The other 18 hours and what you do with that, and how you are as a teammate, and how you handle, campus life. And, I think the most successful teams are the ones that can go hang out with the baseball team. They can hang out with, we work out with the tennis teams in the morning, and having those type of, relationships that we're all on board, we're all in the same place. And, nobody wants to get up and go work out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and nobody wants to get back, after dinner and have to go, find something to eat after. But that's the sacrifices you make, and trying to make sure that those kids understand that from the beginning is what is kind of make or break in the recruiting process.
I agree with that. Actually, I actually agree with everything you just said. Even at the Division I Power Four conference level, it's very, very similar. Uh, so we haven't talked about last week at Swan Lake Golf Resort, but that's got to be something you're still in cloud nine about, I would think, having to finish your national championship. You also had the individual national champion in Stanley Campbell. So you needed every one of his 5 under par. You needed every shot because you beat Illinois Central by a shot. So talk about the week. What are your main memories from the week?
Well, Coach, this is going to be a lot longer of a story, because Swan Lake has absolutely had our number ever since I can remember. In 2012, I think, was the first visit up there, and I was on that team. Since then, our team at Gulf Coast has never finished worse than second in the national tournament everywhere but Swan Lake. And they keep going back, and it's on a 4-year contract now, and it's a great facility. Chad Hutzel does a great job running that event. The NJCAA, it's got, your housing, it's got restaurants, it's got everything you got that you need on campus or on the grounds. But man, has it had our number. From a junior college perspective, you play a lot more of a regional based schedule down here in the Southeast, and that's not the same golf that you see in Northern Indiana, just outside of South Bend. And, that week and that preparation for that week was probably the hardest that I think I and my assistant coach Jackson have ever done. And, it came into the fact of, we have a game plan for this golf course, but we've been here. We've seen it. We've seen the all the struggles that you could possibly imagine. It's a really hard golf course. It's kind of just in an open field, and if you've played golf up in that area, it's not these big massive pine trees or anything, but the rough is a huge difference for us, just like anybody else that comes down here and plays on Bermuda. And there's no chipping areas around those greens. It's green fringe rough. And, that's something we've always struggled with. But it started back in September. We made a trip up, our third trip up to Michigan to play in the Golf Coaches Association event. Had a lot of success up there. I drove 16 hours there. 2 weeks later, we drove 12 more hours back to Swan Lake and played in the national preview. So we spent 10 days in September up there. And best piece of advice I've ever gotten about Swan Lake is from my dad. We were leaving in 2022, I guess it was. Yeah. And, we had a bunch of guys that would just barely miss the green or barely miss the rough. And out there, that's still where the irrigation reaches. So that's your thickest rough on the golf course, is right there. And he said, hey, when y'all come back, why don't you just take their golf ball and just throw it in the rough every single time? And it sounds crazy, but we get into the practice rounds, and I said, guys, if you hit it in the fairway, throw a ball in the rough. If you hit it in the rough, play it from the rough. And we just consistently worked on being a little bit more prepared for that golf course. And the main focus is being that week. The motto for the team leading up to the national tournament was to be mentally elite, be tougher than everyone else. A couple things. Hey, don't hit it out of bounds here. Yeah, that's common sense. Everybody knows that. But and it ended up being a great motto, because we had terrible weather the first 3 or 4 days. 3 of the 4 days, excuse me. I think we ended up with maybe 9+ hours of delays over the first 3 days, 6 different times on and off the golf course. finishing up at night and being back out to finish around the next morning. And man, those guys never batted an eye. It was never, poor me, oh my. It kind of helped. I had 2 Europeans on the team that were used to, hey, just give me my rain gear and let me go. I'll see you in a few hours. And then, but yeah, that whole lead up to that was from nothing but pain and disappointment from our previous trips to that event. And even worse than that, we went and played in the national preview. And I'm not a fan of 36-hole events. I think that, anything can happen the short of the golf tournament, especially when I feel like, maybe we were one of the more talented teams. And we get up to the national preview and we blow it on the back nine. I think we finished second or third. I'm not really sure. It's probably
Third.
it's the first junior college team that had beaten us since the 2022 national championship, I believe. I think the only event we had lost was the Golf Coach Association event. And let me backtrack a little bit. 2 weeks prior, we're at Grand Valley State's event, the GCA event, and we have a lead with 8 holes to go, and we get tracked down. They're a better team. They're on their home golf course. I think we finished third to them in Aurora, some elite Division II, Division III NCAA programs. But I was proud, man. I was proud of how those guys reacted. But we get to the national preview, and we start making those same mistakes again, and we start making poor decisions on the golf course, lack of patience. And somewhere at a Love's gas station in Plymouth, Indiana, about 5 miles from campus, there is a flattened third place trophy in one of those trash cans. And that was probably the most I had berated any individual team in that 5-minute drive. And then it was 2 more hours to Indianapolis. And I said, I don't want to hear another word for 2 hours in this van. I said, when we get to Indianapolis and stop, I said, you guys can talk. We'll have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll act, we'll work from there to see what we need to do. And it was a quiet ride. And then after that, we reassessed. And that's really what helped us, those early failures in September, be more mentally prepared for what was going to be thrown at us, even with the weather, but just a tough golf course. And I could not be more proud of those guys for their mental approach that entire week. 72 holes is a long time. You're going to 3-putt. You're going to hit balls out of play. You're going to, make, silly mistakes or bogeys on par fives. But, ultimately, they were mentally tougher that week. And I'm very thankful for that, obviously, especially by one shot. So could not have been more excited to have the triumph over that golf course. It doesn't matter what other teams were there. The golf course is what I wanted to beat that week.
Well, it sounds like to me you got it, but so did Stanley Campbell. Tell me about him, a little bit about him as a player. Obviously 500 in those conditions on that hard golf course, a great week for him.
Unbelievable young man. Showed up and was more of a role player as a freshman. He was on that national championship team the year before, but when he came in, he said, Coach, these are my goals. This is what's going to happen. He kind of led the way for those good habits in the weight room, on the range, practicing every day. Still allowed to make mistakes, still allowed to have some growing moments, but I mean, that young man was all on board from August all the way through May. And he'll even tell you, he said, I'm going to go win this national championship. I'm going to win it. And he spoke it into existence. And whether that's a false confidence or something you can back up, you better have those guys leading your program. And I was really, really proud of him and excited to see him reap the benefits of all that hard work. Because, just because you work hard in this game doesn't mean you're going to get the trophy at the end of the day. But man, that was so rewarding to see him get that honor. He's going to do amazing things at the next level. He actually came back and stayed with us for a week. He's flying out today, this afternoon, going back home, and then he'll be going back to Central Alabama to Jacksonville State, and he's going to do great things there. But man, what a testament to what hard work and just being, having a goal and going after it than that young man in the season he had. I don't think he finished outside the top 8 at any event. So that tells you he even had that mental approach whenever he wasn't playing his best golf, because I promise you, he didn't play great golf and hit every shot perfect from August to May.
Well, it sounds like to me a great story there and a great ending to his career with you. So we've been talking about coaching a little bit during this hour that we've been together, and you spent 5 seasons as a part-time assistant coach there at Gulf Coast. That's got to be just a really interesting experience. But I know better than most how important and what the great value is in having a great assistant coach. I've had some of the best assistant coaches maybe ever. So I've been very blessed to have that. But tell me the impact that Jackson Wedgeworth, who was an alum there and who actually was on I think the 2018 national championship team for Coach Snell. Tell me about his impact on the program. I know he's a great player, but what kind of a coach is he?
Oh man, if I say bad, does that mean that nobody's going to recruit him later on and give him a full-time gig somewhere? But no, he is outstanding, and I'll tell people this all the time. I'm so lucky to have someone in a position, and it won't be forever. It's a part-time gig, and you know that you have to have a real job. I mean, when I was a part-time coach, you had to. I was teaching at the local school districts. I was coaching a fall and a spring sport, whatever I could get my hands on to make a little extra money. His is kind of split between a real job. He got married. I think it was a little over a year ago, and has a real job. Still plays a little bit, and was pursuing golf professionally. But as an assistant coach, there's not one better. Somebody's going to be really lucky to have him on staff one day. He's going to make a great coach if that's the avenue he decides to follow. There's not many junior college coaches when you get to a golf course that you can say, all right, you take this guy or these two guys, and I'll see you in 4.5, 5 hours. I don't have to police any decision making for him on the golf course. He's well rounded in course management, very mild mannered, very down to earth, and can probably. I don't think his heart rate ever spikes, or if it does, you would never know it. But how he can relate to these young men from his playing experiences, both professionally at the Division I level, and most importantly, how he can relate to them from his experience at the junior college level. I mean, this is a young man that finished top 5 in both of his national championships. And he experienced a heartbreak his freshman year. I think we led for 68 holes, and unfortunately, they made us play all 72 that week out in Mesa, Arizona. He came really close to winning both years, and then our sophomore year, he gets up and down on the last hole for us to win by 1 again. So he understands that the highs and the lows. Prior to getting married and having to get a real job and things like that, he was more involved in the day-to-day practice stuff. He can put together a great practice plan, better than anything I can come up with. I can promise you that. And then now it's more geared to, okay, when can we have this time off, and what tournaments are we going to be able to make? What's the focal point of where we need to be at, and to make the best decision for this team. But I'm on the phone with him multiple times a week too, even if he's not present at every single event. But this young man is the epitome of what it takes to maybe didn't have the greatest junior career, maybe didn't win anything, at the junior college level, no national championships as an individual or anything like that, but just continue to grind and get the absolute most out of his game. And then, like you said, he goes to North Alabama and does something you just don't see a lot. Wins at the Division I level, and I tell people all the time, shuts the world down. He won one of the last events prior to COVID, shutting everybody down in 2020, and that's who that guy is. There's not anything that he's not going to do to work hard, and there's not any person that he cares about more or less than anyone else on our team. He coaches hard, he cares for the kids hard, and I'm really lucky to have him on staff.
It's pretty rare when the head coach and the assistant coach are both were played at the school where they're coaching, and you can really speak to recruits about that. It's really, really important. But you mentioned he won the last tournament before COVID. Basically, that was Auburn, the Auburn Tiger Invitational. As some of the best players in the country were there, and he beat them all. And I talked to Colin Karstens, who was the coach at North Alabama at the time. He said, "Yeah, I love that kid. He was just great." So I assumed, when I saw that he was your assistant, I assumed that he was a pretty good assistant coach for sure.
Oh yeah, I caddied for him a few times through Q school, and that mental approach is exactly why you can let him go be with a player and trust his judgment. He's an outstanding young man, and like I said, if he goes down the coaching path, I know he's up in Birmingham right now, and a few jobs in that area are coming open. And like I said, don't take him from me, but ultimately I know it's going to come at some point. You got to let those guys go and be great, and he's going to be outstanding at whatever career path he goes down.
Oh, great to hear about that. And great to also highlight and outline how important a great assistant coach is to every one of us head coaches. Your plans for the summer? Will you be recruiting? What else you got going on? I know you got 2 little kids. You got to probably have some activities there.
Yeah, so our state junior is next week in Mississippi, and recruiting wise, we're in a different spot. Our conference has different restrictions, and I'm not sure who might be aware or not aware, or who cares at this point. But we're only we have scholarship offers, obviously, for tuition and things, but 5 of those 8 have to be in the state of Mississippi. And Coach, I'm sure you've seen some good players from Mississippi before, but if you got to get 5 of them every 2 years, you better hit the mark on which ones you're getting. And then obviously we have 3 out-of-state spots. Typically, we've got some really good relationships in South Louisiana and all the way over to Europe and throughout. We've had some outstanding South African golfers. My first Swede just moved on this past year, and that's a different animal completely if you've ever been around those guys. But love all of them to death. But you've really got to hit the trail in Mississippi and be ready to go. Luckily for us at the junior college level, usually junior year of high school going into their senior year summer is when we kind of understand, okay, we're not going to get the kid that's committed to Vanderbilt, but we're going to go after everybody until they tell us no. And always being at the event. So we're going to be up there in Hattiesburg the next, I guess, 3 days, Monday through Wednesday, and try and get the best Mississippi kids we can. Right now we're wrapped up for this fall. We've got all of our players signed, a couple international kids coming in, but it's going to be a whole new crew. We talk about having the right fits, and whether it was mutual decisions or other decisions that went into it, we're not going to have any freshmen returning next year. So I'm going to have an entire new crew, and I am so excited about this group coming in. More importantly, I'm actually moving over to Perkinston here in about a month or so, and some of the coaching housing has been built, and finally one has been built to accommodate me having 2 kids and a wife, so a 3-bedroom that we're going to move into. So proximity is going to make those things so much easier. Coach Snell grew up, lived right across the street from campus when we were there. So being around these guys and being able to showcase our campus to recruits and really living it out. Hey, if you're going to come here and play at Mississippi Gulf Coast, hey, I'm going to live here too. And this is going to be ingrained in our family about what we're trying to accomplish here. And we're going to be there for you. Whether it's my wife, who I think babies them, but hey, look, she's the best drink/cart girl, during tournaments that I could ever have. That drink cart, making sure kids have snacks and all that stuff. That's my worst issue in coaching. I just want to go with a couple players and let that be handled, or whether it's my kids being around, making sure that these guys are going to be taken care of is awesome. And it starts from, like I said, being consistent in your recruiting process. This is what we're going to do. These are our goals, and portraying that to them and their parents. And I think, our administration at Mississippi Gulf Coast does an outstanding job of supporting athletics. Like I said, 12 athletic teams. I tell people all the time, our president is a type A personality. She's one of the most influential people in the community college system in Mississippi. And I'm not a van driver. If I don't perform, I do feel like she'll find somebody else that'll do the job. And that's not a knock in any way. I think being held accountable as a coach is outstanding. But along with that accountability comes an administration that really supports every single sport, whether it's the golf program, the football program, whatever it is. And, allowing us these facilities, allowing us the opportunity to be successful is just as important as having a good coaching philosophy.
That's all really good stuff right there. Well, Brad, I appreciate you spending an hour with me. Thanks very much for doing that, and congratulations again on a fantastic season. I wish you all the best going forward. Thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, you bet.